Welcome into another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com. John Alden with you, as always. Glad to be here. I got a couple of guests for you today. We got Mitchell Paige, as always, reacting to the weekend that was with Indiana football. They move on to 11-0, the very first 11-0 start to the season for the Hoosier football program, on a quest to go undefeated in the regular season, also for the first time ever. And then who knows what happens after that. The sky feels like it is the limit for the Hoosiers, and I may not sound excited right now, but trust me, I'm excited. So we'll talk a lot more about what's been going on with Indiana football. Of course, you all know what's going on, but we're going to share our thoughts, give our reactions to the result that happened this past Saturday. A much-needed bye week coming up for the Hoosiers before they take on Purdue in the battle for the Old Oaken Bucket, hoping to retain that trophy for the second year in a row. And then if they take care of business, they'll qualify for the Big Ten championship game in a wait either Ohio State, could be Michigan, could be Oregon, really could be a number of teams depending on how these last 2 weeks of the regular season play out. So we'll break down all of that and much more over these next couple of episodes. Also, Indiana basketball off to a 4-0 start. The Darren DeVries era off to almost as good of a start as you could expect, or hope for, I should say. A questionable result, or maybe not questionable result, but the performance against Incarnate Word left a lot to be desired out on the hardwood. Zach Browning from thehoosier.com is going to join us to talk about, kind of what were some of the struggles during that game, but also we'll highlight a lot of the positives that have happened in the early going here with especially guys like Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, and there's plenty of other bright spots on this team. But of course, at this point in the college basketball season, even the best of the best teams have plenty of kinks to work out, and you hope that your team has plenty of room for growth, and hopefully, again, they achieve that growth as you get towards, the bulk of the conference slate once you get to January, February, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of promise for this basketball team. And of course, we're going to follow along and see how things play out here in Darren DeVries' opening season here in Bloomington. So that's about all the jabbering I'm going to do today. It's pretty late as I'm recording this. We will, at the end of the show, as always, go over the sports that get less attention for IU athletics and kind of let you know what's going on in their worlds, and then we'll wrap up the episode after that. And then also, obviously, nothing Colts related to really talk about right now, at least when it comes to a game that happened this past weekend. But one thing to look forward to this coming Sunday, of course, their match with the Chiefs is kind of a prove-it game. And I know it doesn't mean they're frauds if they lose to the Chiefs, but it's definitely a game where if you come away with this on the road, then you're showing really the entire NFL that you're a contender. And so that's kind of what I mean by prove-it game. It's the moment of truth on whether or not they can reach that upper echelon of the NFL. So excited to see how that plays out later this upcoming weekend. All right, now I'm done jabbering. So before we move into our segment with Mitchell Paige, I do want to tell you once again about our friends with BetMGM. And once again, if you haven't signed up for them for BetMGM, use bonus code ON3, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. First, you'll download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code ON3. You'll deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll then receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use the bonus code ON3 when you sign up. Make this college football season one for the history books. Make it legendary. Of course, Indiana's already made this one for the history books. And I haven't even mentioned this yet. Fernando Mendoza, he sets the single-season passing record, passes Curtis Rourke's record that he set last year, 30 passing touchdowns. Anyway, we'll move on to the disclaimer here. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 only. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable. Bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. All right, joining me now here, as always, here on In Touch with Indiana Sports, Mitchell Paige. Welcome back. It is post week 11, I guess week 11 for Indiana. I don't know what week officially it is in the grand scheme of things, but Indiana has one game left, but they won't play for another couple of weeks, and they're 11-0 for the first time ever.
It's insane. It took a while. It was a little nervy. It was. Watching them, it felt like a team that had played 6 or 7 games in a row or whatever it was. It just was tough and had some emotion. Bye week could not have come at a better time. I think it primes Indiana up for a deep postseason run, get some guys rested. Because even throughout the course of a season, when you have bye weeks that are placed somewhat equally and you only play 3 or 4 games in a row, you're still banged up by the end of the year. So making it all the way to here, 11-0 is unreal no matter what. And now having a bye week, getting ready for a rivalry game where I feel like if they played a million times, Indiana might win 999,999. But it's a rivalry game, so anything can happen.
Yeah, and I guess while we're already on that topic, we can go ahead and mention, and it may even be something that we had talked about last week or even in previous episodes, whenever it might have been. But, of course, Indiana's going for their first ever perfect season, regular season, 12-0. And Purdue, of course, not as bad as last year, but still having maybe the worst year in the Big Ten when it comes to teams, other than maybe Wisconsin. They're both kind of in that same boat. I definitely feel like Wisconsin probably has the better talent when it comes to that sort of thing. But nonetheless, Purdue is playing spoiler maker, and the old cliche of that, the team that has nothing to play for, you're just hoping to ruin. The team that's having a phenomenal season, you're hoping to ruin that in some way, shape, or form. And of course, Purdue, much like Wisconsin, has nothing to lose. They're going to do their darndest to try and end what could be a once-in-a-lifetime thing for Indiana. Going 12-0, even if you're Ohio State, is not easy. It's one of those things that to go unblemished in a regular season, so many things have to go right. And now we can really look back on it and see that there were several moments where if certain things didn't go your way, and some are more obvious than others, of course, the Penn State drive being one of them, the primary thing that I'm talking about here. You have to have so many things like that go your way to get to 12-0. And of course, we all know what's in store 2 weeks from now, but it's crazy to think that Indiana football is in this position right now.
Yeah, it's awesome. They've earned it. It didn't feel like the well-oiled machine that the train is coming and you better get out of the way, and then it all of a sudden does again. It's incredible, just the resilience, and they just keep coming. It's so impressive, and it comes from all different guys. It's never just one guy that you're relying on. Obviously, Charlie Becker has another awesome week. Mendoza's phenomenal, 2 incomplete passes, and one of them was that wind ball that just got sailed up in the wind and kind of inexplicable. So, yeah, that's what really good teams do. I would guess on average maybe 2 or 3 teams in all of college football per year go undefeated. So that should tell you how hard it is to do. And Indiana's got one more test. It's definitely not over. I know we're playing for bigger and better things, but the bucket is still item number 1 to me. Make sure that thing stays in Bloomington. Can you imagine if Purdue beats Indiana? I think the only thing that would trump that for Purdue fans would be the basketball team winning a national championship. I'm not sure that even making the Final Four would be better, more satisfying than ruining something for Indiana like a perfect season.
Yeah, and there's no fan base that could beat if you knew Indiana was going to lose one game in the regular season. If Purdue is the team to do that, no matter how good or bad said Purdue team is, they'll treat that. And I know it's kind of, this is a term that people use for lots of things, but it would be their Super Bowl in every way, shape, and form. And it has every right to be their Super Bowl, because other than this game, than the old Oaken buckets, they have nothing else to play for. Again, ruining the Indiana season, of course, but this would be the perfect way to cap off a season like that. And we don't want to continue to dwell on what could happen in that fashion, but it is something to think about going into next, not this week, but next week.
Yeah, absolutely. This is anything can happen. Ohio State, Michigan. Michigan's beaten them 4 years in a row.
4 times.
And Ohio State won the national championship last year and still couldn't beat Michigan. So, and they were talking about firing Ryan Day. He was getting ready to win the national championship, and they're like, we need to get this guy out. He can't beat Michigan. Now, I don't think the stakes are quite as high in Purdue, Indiana, but to me they are. And
I'm curious what Ross-Ade will look like 2 weeks from now in terms of percentage of fans there.
Yeah, I've said this a couple times. I think there'll be a ton of Indiana fans. They got kind of taken over by Ohio State, but I don't think that game matters the same way that it does. I tweeted something like where the Indiana fans sitting, and every comment's like, we're going to take over Ross-Ade. But and I hate to give Purdue credit for anything. We're not quite in Purdue week, so I feel like I'm allowed to do this. They've got about as good a fan base as anyone in terms of showing up no matter what. They have not had a lot to cheer for. And I've turned their games on a couple times this year, and they still pack that stadium. It's impressive. I expect it to be loud. I expect it to be Purdue dominant, maybe even if it's just 60-40. I expect it to be a great environment. And if Indiana, similar to what happened at Penn State, if you let the crowd get into it, Purdue has good players somewhere. They didn't look like it against Washington, but I'm sure they're on the team somewhere. You let them get some momentum and good things can happen for them. We just watched the basketball team almost lose to Incarnate Word, start making some shots. You start feeling good. Indiana starts missing some shots. It's possible. Anything's possible. Now, do I expect that to happen?
No.
And I think the bye week comes at about the worst time for Purdue because they're going to feel the full wrath of a fresh Indiana team getting ready to gear up for the Big Ten championship. So, no, I don't expect it to happen, but something to think about.
Yeah, you're likely going to see Elijah Surratt come back. Of course, he's not been present since before the Penn State game. Of course, got hurt during the Maryland game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
He'll be back. I don't know how many. I could see it being one of those games for him specifically where you see him maybe play for a half, and then depending on what the score is, if it's, like a 28-3 type thing going into halftime, you probably don't play him the rest of the game, I would imagine. And really, at that point, you would hope the result isn't in question. However, we did see what happened with South Carolina, Texas A&M this past weekend, 30-3, and then they end up losing 31-30
or anything. As a guy that used to live in that state, you just can't.
Point being with that, if Indiana is at a point where the result is no longer in question, which I would imagine it would happen by halftime or shortly after, I think at that point you pull as many important players as you can, because at that point you don't want to overlook the rest of the game that you're playing, but you do need to rest up those who are going to be important for not only Ohio State or whoever they end up playing in the Big Ten championship game, but every game beyond that as well, because I think it's still tough for Indiana fans to kind of think this way, because it even still is for me. There is a national championship at stake that they could potentially and maybe should be playing for in January.
Yeah, that's 2 months away. I think it's a little over 2 months of football left for the two teams that are going to play for the national championship. But there's also an element. Surratt hasn't been on the field for a long time. He hasn't been really throwing at full speed in game speed situations. You've had Becker out there making a lot of plays. Surratt's still your guy, but I would assume if Surratt starts the game, it's going to take a couple of throws his way to get back in step with him and Mendoza. It's just a long time. It's not like a running back where you can just kind of plug and play. He gets his feet under him and is able to just kind of go. Receiver is so much about timing and ball placement, and each guy runs his routes differently. Charlie Becker maybe runs his comebacks at 16.5 yards, and Surratt runs his at 16 yards. And that half yard is the difference between a first down and whatever. And you just kind of get comfortable who's out there. You can adjust that. It's not to say that either route is better at 16.5 or 16. It's just they run them differently. So they're going to be in a little bit different place. It's going to take some time for Surratt and Mendoza to get back on the same page. I would guess you probably get a little longer runway with Surratt and Mendoza, no matter what the score is, just to get that rhythm going back into, what's to come later.
Yeah. And the other banged up portion of Indiana's team that I think most people recognize is the offensive line. Drew Evans has been out. I believe there's one other guy. I know Khalil Benson's been in and out of some games. There may even be somebody else that I'm not thinking of right now. But the offensive line that was there this past weekend gave up 5 sacks. And against a team like Wisconsin, Wisconsin historically is a really good defensive team. I believe Luke Fickell is a defensive-minded coach. So I don't want to discredit the havoc that they were able to create. Yeah. But at the same time, when you're missing guys who are very important, and you've kind of seen this building over the last several weeks since Drew Evans has been gone, it's starting to really become a concern about not the depth of the team as a whole, but the offensive line depth could be a really big problem when you're playing, the elite of the elite in college football.
Yeah, and don't quote me on any of the stats, but this is just a perception. Wisconsin doesn't lose games because they can't stop people. I think they still have a really good defense that was effective. They just can't put the ball in the end zone. And speaking of injuries, when I saw their injury report, I don't understand how they even still have a team. It felt like their whole team was on the injury report. I can't even imagine an injury bug biting someone as bad as it's bit the Wisconsin Badgers this year. But I thought they played fast, they played hard, and it kind of overwhelmed Indiana up front. They're going to need some key pieces back if they want to make the run they want to make, because you can't have that, obviously. They're drive killers, momentum shifters, and against really, really good teams, every inch is the difference between winning the game and losing the game. So excited for Drew Evans to get back. I don't really know what the deal is with him. He hasn't.
Yeah, they haven't really been super transparent, I feel like, about what his injury is and his legitimate timeline, I feel like.
Yeah, and I know one thing. If I trust anyone, it's Kurt Cignetti. So I'm sure that they're doing right by him and making sure that he's good to go for the games that matter. But offensive line's another thing. You got to kind of work your way back into it. There's a lot of feel and connection with the guys next to you. So I would hope that Drew Evans will be back this week and at least get some run to get some live speed reps against a real opponent to get ready for, again, the things to come, because I think there's a lot of really cool things that Indiana has a chance to go get this year.
So obviously, I think this is the second season where you've had 2 bye weeks, and I think that's coincided with the fact that, teams that are playing in the playoff, they have so many extra games now, potentially, depending on how far you go. How beneficial do you think an extra bye week would have been for you and your teams? And I know, again, the playoff system was different back when you were playing, but do you think this is something that should have been implemented a long time ago, the extra bye week?
I'm probably the wrong guy to ask, if I'm honest. I didn't take very many hits, and a lot of it was just on my legs, and I wasn't running deep balls. I was just running 12-yard sits and then fall on the ground and try not to die. So the bye weeks were always kind of crappy to me because I was just ready to play.
Yeah.
But I also didn't bear 25% of what everyone else was feeling. So I would guess if you ask someone that was a little more physical and more in the trenches than me, yeah, they'd take another bye week. Now I do wish, and it's not possible to do this, but I wish there was some way to organize them a little bit better so one team doesn't get one in the – because I think the University of Miami has this. They had their bye weeks. They were done in week 5. And then they just had game. And
yeah,
that just doesn't feel fair.
There should almost be like the way that India, and I feel like I'm stepping on your toes right now.
No.
I had somebody in the comments last week mention that it wasn't for you specifically, but they said I stepped on another guest toes that we had on, and now I'm very subconscious of it. But I do appreciate, I don't mind the criticism, but it does make me very aware of something like that. So I'll let you finish your point.
Yeah, it's so funny. I haven't done this near as much as you, but like the thousands of really nice things that people say, you're like, oh, that's awesome. But you don't think about it when you're actively doing it. And then one person's like, hey, you could have let that person speak for just a couple more seconds. And then it's all you think about. Yeah, that's funny. But kudos to people listening. And that's the coolest thing ever. It's got to be cool that people care enough to let you know that that's what they think.
That's true.
Whether you agree with
What
it or
were you
not
trying
is
to
up
make?
to you.
I don't even remember what we were talking about.
We were talking about bye weeks, and
that's right.
I let you know that I was soft. Is basically what happened.
Oh yeah, you were mentioning Miami having theirs early. I feel like the way that Indiana has theirs spread out, of course, not every Big Ten team has theirs to where it was right in the middle. I think it was after Game 5. They had a bye. They were going out west to face Oregon. That was the first bye week. Again, very perfectly timed, it felt like, for Indiana. Then you have the entire back half of your schedule minus Purdue, which, when you think about it, if Indiana is going to make the run that they could make for a national title, I mean, everything's kind of split up evenly into 3 different thirds of the season. Of course, the beginning when you have tons of non-conference games, the thick of your conference schedule right in the middle, and then your final regular season game coupled with everything that comes with the postseason. Again, it does seem like the way Indiana had it was pretty perfect, but it feels like there needs to be some sort of regulation where you play kind of like the NFL. They don't have bye weeks until at least week 6, right? Isn't that what? And I know they only have one.
Yeah.
You what?
I don't have any idea. I don't watch the NFL at all.
There is something. I think it is week 5 or week 6 is when the first one is allowed to happen. And again, they only have one for an 18-game regular season schedule, which is absolutely bananas to me. But it is the NFL, of course. But I feel like if you do something like that, and then you find a way somewhere later on in the season to kind of divide it up evenly, that's probably the best way to do it. There's probably not a perfect science because college football is so much different than the NFL. There's 32 teams versus 134, 36, whatever it might be. I don't know if that number is correct or not, but it's definitely a bigger animal when it comes to the amount of teams in college football.
Yeah, you'll never get the exact right. This is perfect for everyone. This is just a fan complaining that Indiana had to play a bunch of games in a row and they look tired and banged up a little bit. And I like it better when they're winning by 40 at halftime and I don't have to sweat. So
we're going to be sweating a lot, though, I think. I mean, maybe not every single result, but I mean, let's do a little, I guess, predicting here or theorizing, if you will, about what's to come. Of course, we have the Big Ten championship game, which is Indiana. Have they clinched a Big Ten title appearance? Do we know that for sure? I don't know if I feel like that would have been a big deal if that had already happened.
Yeah, I don't know how it's not.
There's got to be some weird tiebreaker, like if Indiana loses to Purdue.
It's like opponent winning percentage or something. If they lose,
it would be Ohio State losing to Michigan. They'd both be 11-1. Oregon, if they went out, they would also be 11-1. And then that's probably the issue. That's probably why Indiana hasn't clinched anything just yet.
Yeah, I mean, take care of business, then you clinch it.
So either way, we're going to do the fan thing, which is to assume that they're going to beat Purdue and be in the Big Ten championship game. So you have that play out right. I'd say I think we were pretty correct on what we said a few weeks back, where if Indiana loses that game, whether it's a close result or not, the way that let's throw this out here too. Texas A&M probably wins the SEC, they'll get a bye. Let's say Ohio State wins, they'll get a bye. If Texas Tech keeps winning, they probably get a bye for the Big 12. At that point, your final bye is likely going to be either the runner-up for the SEC or the Big Ten. And I guess at that point, you're probably looking at the result of the conference championship game. Does that sound correct, I would imagine?
Yeah, I don't – with Alabama losing and still probably playing in the SEC championship, having 2 losses, I don't think there's a world that Indiana drops past 3, even if they lose.
I think there's a world where they do if it's not a close game. And I don't think I want to say this too, though. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but in the world that it is, then they probably do drop to 5, 4 or 5, I would imagine.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe
I'm wrong. Who knows?
Maybe. I mean,
what if if Texas A&M loses to whoever their opponent is, I think that for sure gives you 2 SEC teams with a bye.
Yeah.
If Texas A&M remains undefeated.
Yeah, and as long as Indiana takes care of business somewhat, I think they remain at 2.
Yeah, we'll see. That would be. I mean, if Indiana and Ohio State are the only undefeated teams. Let's say Texas A&M loses. I think they play Texas in their final regular season game, if I'm not. Yeah, Texas got ransacked by Georgia. So it's likely going to be a Georgia versus Texas A&M SEC championship game.
I think it'll still be Alabama.
Still, because of the head-to-head?
They've only lost one SEC game, yeah.
That's true. Okay.
They just lost.
Georgia's only lost one, correct? Or they lost two?
But they beat Georgia, or Alabama beat Georgia. So I think Alabama still has the inside track to the SEC unless they lose.
Yeah. It's in my head, it's getting so convoluted the more that I even say it out loud. But things will, of course, work themselves out over the next 2 weeks.
This is it, John. Win your games. You win the Big Ten, you're number one overall.
Yeah.
That's it.
And then you got to win 3 games. Then you win 3 games. If you don't get the bye, you got to win 4 games, which is a lot different, of course, than 3. At least
they're 5 games from being a national champion,
which is very weird to think about. You'll play in the quarterfinals, which I don't know if those are. Yeah, those are like the bowl game scenario, like the ones that they are the glorified, Fiesta Bowl, Rose Bowl, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then you have the. I think the semifinals are also one of the bowl games, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the championship is its own standalone game. Yeah. But either way, that's kind of what Indiana has potentially in front of them one way or another. And I guess when all is said and done, if things don't play out in their best favor, if they do somehow end up not getting one of those byes, they will certainly be hosting a game in Memorial Stadium this time around compared to last year when they were traveling to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think an away first round is out of the question.
Yeah.
Probably no matter what.
Unless you lose to Purdue.
I think probably no matter what.
You think losing twice? I think if you lose twice and one of those losses is to a 2-win Purdue team, I think you might be falling out to not out of the playoff, but falling to a traveling game.
Maybe. Yeah, losing to Purdue would be bad. That'd be bad.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen.
No, and again, I know we've talked about it a lot, and I think it's just because we feel like we have to.
Yeah.
But it still is one of those things where even saying it out loud, it feels nonsensical. But again, who knows what will happen?
Yeah.
We've kind of exhausted, I feel like, everything that we could talk about here as we kind of wind down the regular season. What's kind of on your mind before we wrap this thing up when it comes to Indiana football that we may have not hit on?
Nothing. This kind of works for me. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but I didn't. This is the first home game, this last one, that I didn't go to.
That's right.
Yeah, I was in the ER, John. I have a kidney stone, and if anyone listening has had a kidney stone, please at me on Twitter and tell me about your experience and tell me if I'm soft for thinking I was dying. I had never had anything like this, and I thought I was shutting down internally. It's the most pain I've ever been in my entire life. So please let me know what you were feeling and how you got rid of it. I still haven't gotten over it. It's still sitting in my kidneys. It still hurts like a mother.
I definitely can't sympathize, but it is something that has terrified me forever. But I do want to ask you this. Like, do you feel like you missed out on this last Indiana home game because of all this?
Yes. I wanted to be there. I was looking forward to that game as much as maybe Illinois was the one I was looking forward to the most, but
how often do you get 70 degrees in Bloomington in the final home game in November?
Never. And it looked electric in there. It felt like the fans had a big impact on what was happening on the field, kind of helping bring some life, and I didn't get to be a part of it. So now I just have to make it up. I get to go to West Lafayette, go to the Big Ten Championship, and we'll see. And then I'm trying to find a way to every game.
I was say, last thing I'll ask you then is, are you going to be at every postseason game no matter what gets in the? I mean, again, I thank God you're not having your kidney stone in a month, because that would be problematic. But
that would be a big problem.
If all of your health stays normal,
I am going to exhaust all possible resources to make it. Yes, that's the plan.
Well, there you go. If you're going to be at any game and you haven't met one Mitchell Paige, go seek him out and tell him how you dealt with your kidney stone problems. You can bond over that.
Please, I'm open to anything. I actually get to take some medicine right now, and I can't wait because some pain's coming.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and doing this with me, regardless of your medical issues. I am very glad it is not me right now, because if
That's
it was
fair.
me, I probably would have been like, "Hey, Mitchell, I'm I'm a insert expletive I don't want to say right now. I'm not going to do the show today. I'm going to go cry in my bed." But
It's
thankfully, that
always
is not
time.
me.
It's always time for Indiana football, baby. Always got time.
We'll talk again soon, sir.
All right, man. Peace.
Great stuff from Mitchell Paige as always, and I wish him the best, that he can get through his kidney stone, because that is absolutely terrifying, and I pray that I never have to deal with that. He and I were talking off the air before we did that segment, and I'm not going to get into the details, but uh, it doesn't sound fun. We'll just leave it at that. So wishing him all the best, and hoping that he can get past that sooner rather than later. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our basketball segment with Mr. Zach Browning from the Hoosier.com. And I'm sure plenty of you are very excited about what's going on with Indiana basketball so far. As I said last week, I think that Marquette game was the first time that I've been truly excited about an Indiana basketball team in quite a while. I hope there are plenty more moments like that this year. Of course, we'll see them play several Power Five opponents with Kansas State, Louisville, and Kentucky on the non-conference schedule. So a lot more chances to see them prove themselves against really some elite level competition. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. But right now, we're going to we're going to bring on our next guest out, I should say, and we'll do that right now. Joining me once again from the Hoosier.com, it is staff writer Zach Browning. Welcome back to In Touch with Indiana Sports, my friend.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm always happy to be here.
We're in the thick of crossover season. I feel like this is a term I've, at least at this point, overused a ton. But this is the second straight year where football has had so much momentum going into basketball season that everyone's paying so close attention to both programs and what they're doing. Of course, with basketball right now, a whole lot more momentum than where things were heading last year with Mike Woodson, with being a brand new era with Darren DeVries right now. Had a big win against Marquette. Things look very promising so far through these first four games until you get to Incarnate Word the other night. And it wasn't necessarily the worst performance of all time. It's just the first time so far through this early portion of the season where another team kind of forced Indiana to play a little bit differently from where Darren DeVries is kind of aiming to get them to.
Yeah, it was an interesting game because it's the first time all season that Indiana hasn't gotten a three-point shot to fall, and there's been so much talk about it leading up to the season and the offseason, whether it's been the team, whether it's been people around the team, the media. Indiana wants to take the three this year. They want to take it a lot, and that's no secret to anybody around the country. And through the first three games, they had not shot below 41%. It was 41% in the opener and then 50% in back-to-back games against Marquette, then again against Milwaukee. And then against Incarnate Word, it's not like the shot selection was poor. It's not like they were taking a ton of long-range twos or free-throw line jumpers like the Mike Woodson era or anything like that. It wasn't a ton of post-ups. It was still, the shot chart was generally the same as it had been throughout the early part of the season. It's just the shot simply didn't fall. And sometimes you're dealing with college athletes that are 18 to 24 years old. That's going to happen. Sometimes the shots don't fall, and we kind of saw what the offense looks like if Indiana isn't hitting that three-pointer consistently against Incarnate Word.
And I was talking about this with somebody earlier today, and Incarnate Word played like a weird 1-3-1 zone defense, which is not very common in any level of college basketball, I feel like, anymore. Obviously, when Jim Boeheim was at Syracuse, you saw 2-3 zone a lot, and that's even a rarity nowadays in most cases. But anytime you see weird defenses like that, it feels like that can play a part in the offense feeling a little bit wonky for teams that rely on the three-pointer. Yeah, if you're able to break down the zone and get open and start hitting your shots, you can really burn up a team that way. But sometimes you can be so open, it's almost like it's uncomfortable the way that they're getting open in those situations.
Yeah, that 1-3-1, it was weird. There was times where I made note that Incarnate Word would have four players on one side of the floor. Three of them were outside the three-point arc at one point on one possession defense. It was just a weird zone. And Indiana kind of picked it apart. Incarnate Word started in man for like a possession, then went to the 1-3-1 for a couple of minutes, then went back to man, then went back to the 1-3-1 before kind of ditching it around the halfway point. of the first half, because Indiana, I think I made a note of it too. It was like 7 of their first 9 field goals were either layups or dunks. Obviously, they weren't getting the 3-point shot to fall, and Incarnate Word wasn't doing a great job of not letting Indiana just easily break down the zone. So it was weird, that zone defense, that defense as a whole. And again, the shot selection, the shot quality, they were open looks. It wasn't like Lamar Wilkerson was taking consistently only 30-footers or Tucker DeVries was taking only 3-point shots off the dribble. They were open looks. They weren't pretty much contested. It was, again, not really any different than what we'd seen the first 3 games of the year. It's just they didn't fall. And you're going to have that. You're going to have that with some of these nights. And again, it was probably slightly concerning. Indiana doesn't have a dominant interior presence. Sam Alexis is their third leading scorer to begin the season. But if the 3-point shot isn't falling, and Indiana is not getting a ton of stops and not getting out in transition a ton, which they did a little bit against Incarnate Word, but not a ton. But if the 3-point shot's not falling, there's not really another avenue of, oh yeah, we'll just give it down low to insert big man. There's no Trace Jackson Davis you can just give the ball to down in the post and say, go get us 25 points because our 3-point shot isn't falling. Sam Alexis, Reed Bailey, those aren't those types of guys. So it was concerning, and it will be concerning as the season goes on. If Indiana isn't able to get those shots to fall from deep, the offense is going to look like it did against Incarnate Word.
Yeah, it really is the opposite of what we have grown used to in Indiana basketball team looking like over the years, when they were relying so heavily on an interior presence. But the opposite issue there was if somebody down low, especially if you only had one really elite big man, got in foul trouble and you didn't have shooters to back him up whenever he wasn't having that good of a game, that was your issue. Whereas you kind of have the opposite thing going on now with the way Darren DeVries has kind of concocted his version of an Indiana offense. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out whenever Indiana gets to more competitive games like Kansas State you have coming up on the 25th. And then later on in December, of course, you got Louisville and Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and then on the road at Kentucky. Real quick on Louisville, I don't know if you watched them play Kentucky the other day, but they look like the real deal. They've got a freshman named Mikel Brown Jr., who may be one of the best freshmen that, at least in my lifetime, I've ever seen at the University of Louisville. And so that's going to be a very interesting kind of barometer matchup for this Indiana team whenever we get to that point in December 6th, which also would be the same day that Indiana football would play whoever they end up facing potentially in the Big Ten championship game. Of course, likely Ohio State if things go the way that they could end up going. You would have a 2 p.m. tip at Gainbridge Fieldhouse for that Louisville game. And then I think they've already decided it's going to be a late 8 o'clock p.m. kick at Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten football championship. So a lot of good things to look forward to on the horizon as you get close to that portion of the sports calendar, I feel like.
Yeah, and Louisville, to bring them up, that's probably the backcourt I've been most impressed with so far this season, and it's crazy because we're in a year where the freshmen in college basketball are kind of dominating the national headlines and the national storylines with the Darren Petersons of the world, the AJ DeBances, Cam Boozers of the world, and Mikel Brown might be just as good as all of them. I mean, he played with Team USA over the summer in their kind of U19, I guess, World Cup trip, and he was fantastic in that too. He's fantastic. Their 2 guards are kind of opposite ends of the spectrum because Brown is playing in that Indiana game will be like his 8th college basketball game of his career, and Ryan Conwell will be playing his about 130th college basketball game, the other starting backcourt guard. The Xavier transfer, he's been all over the place. Indiana, he's been all over the place. But that backcourt does scare you. That's probably the best backcourt, even better than perhaps Purdue, that Indiana will face this season.
What's crazy too about that game, and then we'll move on. Louisville and Indiana now play pretty much the exact same fast-paced style as each other, and so I feel like when we get to that portion of the schedule, it's just going to come down to which team makes more shots because, I mean, they both play that high-flying NBA style of offense where both teams will probably take close to 30 3-pointers during that game. And if they're both hitting shots, we could see both teams flirt with the 100-point mark potentially. So that's going to be a very exciting game right now. Louisville, number 6 in the country with the new AP poll. I'm sure if they continue to win up until that point, that could potentially climb even higher. So we'll have to wait and see what happens when we get to that point. But I want to talk more positively about the Indiana basketball team specifically. Obviously, one of the biggest takeaways so far from what this new look Indiana team looks like is the tag team duo of Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries. The 1-2 punch that I feel like Indiana hasn't really had, at least since Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino. Of course, one of those being a big man as opposed to two guards or two guys who can play on the perimeter. So what do you like so far about this dynamic duo that Indiana has this season?
I really like how they're being used. This isn't obviously with Darren DeVries. It's not a traditional, you guys are the point guards, you guys are the wings, you guys are the centers. You have to kind of stick to those constructs, specifically offensively, and only do guard things or only do forward things or only do center things. Lamar Wilkerson, the amount of times I've seen Lamar Wilkerson screen or even just go screen for Tucker DeVries, and then the opposite too, the amount of times Tucker DeVries has set a screen and then come off a flare screen of his own or something like that. The creative ways that Darren DeVries has kind of drawn up to get Wilkerson and get his son opportunities with the ball in their hands from 3-point range has really stuck out to me. They're being used in a multitude of ways. They're being used as ball handlers for screening actions. They're being used as the screeners themselves. They're kind of just being run around the court in off-ball actions, off multiple staggered screens as well. So I think that's been very creative. And then also I just think it's the gravity that those two have. And it's the gravity not just out to 21 feet to that 3-point line. It's the gravity out to 30 feet. Lamar Wilkerson has taken and making plenty of 3-pointers 4 or 5 steps behind the 3-point line. Tucker DeVries has attempted some, made some as well, but Tucker DeVries is more so he's just got incredible body control to kind of square up no matter where he's going. He could be falling completely opposite of the basket and still find a way to turn his shoulders and get his body rotated to hit that shot. But when you have two guys like a Lamar Wilkerson, like a Tucker DeVries, and then you throw in a guy like Tatum Conaway who's shown that he can maybe semi-consistently get his guy beaten off the bounce, it opens so much more room for the likes of Tatum Conaway in those driving lanes, for Trent Sisley around the basket, Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey, because the floor isn't clogged. Defenses, no matter who they are, you can't help off of Tucker DeVries. You can't help off of Lamar Wilkerson. And I think that more so than anything, I think that's probably why we've seen Sam Alexis have the start that he has, because he's found the holes and he's found the crevices in those defenses, because if he's going to go one-on-one, especially against these mid-major big men, he's going to dominate against those guys down low. So the spacing that is created by the 3-point shooting of Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries, that's been instrumental and is as key to Indiana's offensive flow as actually making the 3-point shots themselves. It's just the threat of being able to is almost just as important.
Yeah, and I think the key for Indiana, if they are going to find themselves in the upper echelon of the Big Ten standings this season, you're obviously going to hope and expect for consistency from both of those guys, Wilkerson and DeVries. But if every night you can have at least one of those guys that we had mentioned, the kind of the supporting cast, be that third guy, whether it be Sam Alexis off the bench or even Trent Sisley off the bench or one of the other starters, Tatum Conaway, I don't necessarily think it'll be Reed Bailey. But either way, somebody could grow into that third guy role, or maybe even a couple of guys could potentially, I don't want to say not rotate in and out. That's not really what I'm getting at. But if you have guys alternating having big nights to be that third guy to make Indiana one of those better teams in the conference, I don't know if that's something we should necessarily expect this early in the season, because we're still we haven't seen them against elite level competition just yet. Of course, that game against Marquette was a decent early test. Marquette did fall to Maryland, I believe, early this week. And that's a Maryland team that I'm not sure how good they are. They lost to Georgetown, but also that Georgetown team might be good. So there's so many things that we could overreact to at this point in the college basketball season, the same way we do with college football. If you go back to the beginning of the college football season, everyone thought the LSU win over Clemson was, big for them. And it turns out both those teams suck. And so you never really know until you get a little bit deeper into the season. But that still seems like a recipe for having a successful first year with Darren DeVries. If you can not only have consistently those two guys, Wilkerson and DeVries, but again, a third guy that can kind of be, a rotating cast of characters throughout the season.
Yeah, I think Josiah Miles potentially could end up being that if he finds his kind of offensive rhythm. Nick Dorn hasn't really played much yet so far as he's working his way back, but Nick Dorn might be my number one candidate to kind of be that number 3 go-to scorer for Indiana, even if he isn't in the starting lineup. But I think the biggest key for IU, and it goes back to what we saw against Incarnate Word, is IU they simply, if they want to actually be a competing team, be a top 7 seed in the tournament, be a team that competes in the Big Ten, you have to be good defensively, because there are going to be nights, as we saw against Incarnate Word, where the three-point shot isn't falling. And there's not an obvious answer offensively. If that three-point shot isn't falling, you're not just going to be able to pour in points in the paint. You're just not that type of team. There's no answer really offensively. If your three-point shot isn't falling, it's just going to be a bad night for you offensively. So how do you counteract a bad shot shooting the ball from distance if you don't really have any other means of consistently getting easy looks and consistently putting up 90 to 100 points on a team without that three-point shot? Well, it's a defense. If you hold a team, if you are only going to score 60 to 70 points because your three-point shot isn't falling, the only way you're really going to win those games, John, is by holding teams to 50, 60 points yourself. So I think the defense is really where this team's ceiling lies. If this team can become not even an elite defense, but a top half of the Big Ten, a good enough defense, a defense that can, if, like I mentioned, the offense is struggling on any given night, can kind of lock in and take over and really limit the opposing team, then this team's ceiling raises significantly. If this is a defense, though, that is really going to rely on the offense to outscore other teams, we may not see as successful or as high of a ceiling for this Indiana team. I think the defense is really, really the key for IU, despite how good of a shooting team they are.
Zach, I'm not sure how many other teams from the Big Ten you've been able to kind of take a look at so far in the early portion of the season, but of those who you have seen, who's impressed you so far and you think can maybe make a run at a Big Ten championship?
Well, there's a couple of teams that stand out. Obviously, Purdue, that win over Alabama was very impressive. Purdue, despite, I know we were talking about it, I feel like earlier this month, last month, about the Kentucky exhibition and how maybe we were probably overreacting to that. We probably were. Purdue's going to be all right. Braden Smith's the best player in the country. Purdue's going to be all right. I think Illinois, with what they throw at you and the amount of talent those Europeans have, that Illinois is going to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten, if not the best teams in the Big Ten. There's a lot of them, though. I haven't been super impressed with the likes of Ohio State. You know, that UND game was, they gave up 100 points. Yes, UND does the pressing thing and we're going to just score as many points as possible, not really worry about defense thing, but haven't been too impressed with the likes of UND. I do think Iowa's going to be good. They just beat Xavier, who isn't really good
That's going to be, I don't mean to interrupt you real quick, but I don't want it to leave my mind. Whenever Indiana plays Iowa on the schedule, that's going to be one I feel like a lot of people are circling, just because of the fact that Ben McCollum was kind of seen as that other head coach that could have been in Bloomington had they not went ahead and hired Darren DeVries. So I think a lot of people, Indiana fans especially, are going to be keeping a close eye on how Iowa's season is going and doing a lot of comparing between those two teams to see, kind of get an early gauge on whether Indiana made the right choice. I'm not necessarily worried about that, but it's definitely something I think a lot of people will be paying attention to.
Well, and throw in that Bennett Sturts might be the second or third best player in the Big Ten, behind Yaxel Landenberg and obviously Braden Smith himself, and probably Trey Coppin run up there too. But I think Michigan, despite what happened with that Wake Forest game, I think Michigan will probably be fine. Michigan State is still going to be fine. Tom Izzo teams are always fantastic. They've got plenty of talent. It's kind of a different type of Michigan State team that we're traditionally accustomed to seeing, but there's a lot of talent in the Big Ten. I think Indiana, again, if you're competing for one of those top spots, one of those double buys in the Big Ten, I think that's a successful season. I'm intrigued about the West Coast schools, because Washington, without Desmond Cloud right now, still kind of dealing with an ankle injury. I mean, we've all seen over the past couple of years in college basketball how good Desmond Cloud can be in certain instances. I like what Bryson Tucker's doing over there. He's showing that he can make some three-point shots. If you're from an Indiana perspective, seeing Bryson Tucker out there. But Oregon, what happens when Jackson Shelstad is 100% healthy and all of that stuff. So I think it'll be interesting. Penn State, probably the worst team in the Big Ten. I'm going to say that. They have not impressed me at all. And I think that'll be, again, not that any Big Ten game is like game off or anything like that, but I do think Indiana probably a little bit fortunate that Penn State is one of those December Big Ten games when they have that stretch of Kentucky and Louisville in the other Big Ten game. I think that having a team like Penn State, who you probably should beat wherever that game's being played, you probably should beat that Penn State team if you want to be considered a good team in the top half of the conference. So I think Indiana probably lucks out a little bit there that they have Penn State along with that week of death, I guess, so to speak, with Louisville and Kentucky as well.
Yeah, that other Big Ten game, early Big Ten game, is Minnesota, another team that I don't believe is expected to be on top of things this year, at least compared to some of the other teams in the conference. So definitely an not easy draw, a more favorable draw, we'll say, for Indiana when it comes to those early Big Ten matchups. But Zach, before I let you go, anything you want to promote coming up with the Hoosier.com?
Lots of IU football recruiting news over at thehoosier.com after a big week in Bloomington, perhaps the biggest recruiting weekend on the IU football side of things ever. So be on the lookout over the next week or so. This bye week is a good opportunity to kind of catch up on all things IU football recruiting. So I know I'll have a ton of stuff over there. The national guys have all had a ton of stuff over there on thehoosier.com as well. And then obviously the basketball season continues to truck along. Lindenwood on Thursday, just one game this week for IU basketball. But again, we'll have you covered on all things Indiana athletics. I know men's soccer just announced as the number 6 seed in the NCAA tournament this week. So Indiana, they'll play on Sunday. So I know Colin McMahon will have you covered with that stuff over there on thehoosier.com as well. So yeah, just anything Indiana athletics, we've got you covered over there.
So much stuff going on. Of course, you mentioned the bye week and then Old Oaken bucket week following that. And then who knows what happens in the postseason for Indiana football. I'm certainly very excited and hopeful that this will be a deeper postseason run than last year. But again, you got to play the games to find out how things will end up turning out for the Hoosiers. So, Zach, I appreciate you for coming on once again. We'll check in with you down the road, my friend.
No problem. Thanks for having me, John.
A big thanks to Zach Browning. Go check out all that he's got going on with thehoosier.com. Of course, we've got a brilliant staff of great writers, including Zach. We also got Colin McMahon, Kyler Staley, Alec Lasley. The list goes on and on of those who write really good stuff for us at the Hoosier. And again, you can also subscribe. I'm sure there's always a great deal going on with thehoosier.com. I don't have it right in front of me. Usually gets like $1 down, and you get or it's like $1 a month for a year, something like that. So if you haven't done that, especially if you want to be up to date on all of the more exclusive content for Indiana football and basketball right in the heart of crossover season, this is the time to hop on and get a premium membership with the site. So if that's something that tickles your fancy, then check that out. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our final portion of today's show. We're going to highlight some of the things that are going on with some of the lesser-known teams or less paid attention to teams within IU athletics. And starting off with Indiana men's soccer, they learned where they'll be going for the NCAA tournament. They earned the number 6 national seed. That means they get a bye from the first round of the tournament, and they'll await the winner of St. Louis and Kentucky in what is the second round of the tournament. And I know they've already played Kentucky this year. Yeah, they played both these teams already and defeated both of them in the regular season as well. Number 15, St. Louis, they defeated 1-0 back on September 3rd, way earlier in the season. And then they defeated number 25, Kentucky on the road 2-1. So 2 teams that they're both familiar with, and hopefully it'll be the start of what could be another really deep run for Hoosier soccer. So shout out to them for where they were able to place in the postseason. All right, moving on to women's volleyball. I did what I did a few weeks ago, and I forgot to look at the results ahead of time. So I'm sitting here live scrolling I knew the men's soccer stuff already, and that's always where I go to first. And so that's probably why I sat there. I'm like, okay, I already know what's going on. I'm in the know, right? But checking in on what happened with women's volleyball over the last week, they had Oregon come to town. They won 3-1. I believe that's coming off of, that's a bounce back win from their loss in Madison that weekend before what was number 11 Wisconsin. So they defeated unranked Oregon 3-1. They also followed up with a 3-0. I don't think you say nil in volleyball. A 3-set sweep against Maryland. So 2-game match winning streak for women's volleyball. I am all over the places tonight, guys. Bear with me, but I do appreciate you all, especially those of you who stay all the way for this final segment of the show. I'm sure it's not all of you, but for those of you who do, I genuinely appreciate it. But women's volleyball coming up for this week, their slate this week, they've got Rutgers on Thursday. That game, that matches at home on Big Ten Plus. And then this Saturday, a big one in Bloomington for sure. The number 1 team in the country, Nebraska, will be in town. I mean, I can't believe that game is only on Big Ten Plus. I'm sure it's because it's on a Saturday when college football is going on, but it's a shame that you can only watch that game if you have Big Ten Plus as opposed to regular Big Ten Network. So, but I'm sure it'll be a packed house in Bloomington, and hopefully Indiana can pull. I mean, that would be monumental. They've beaten some really good teams this year, so I guess you'll find out if they're ready to take that next step. If they can take down Nebraska, this upcoming Saturday. And then finally, women's basketball, they are off to a 4-0 start, and that was highlighted by, I guess we'll start before that. They got a win at home against Marshall, 57-51. And then I believe this is back this weekend. I was following along a little bit with this game. Florida State on the road. I think they were down by quite a bit in the third quarter in that game. But they were able to pull off the win late, 76-72. Of course, winning on the road, especially in a Power 5 environment. Even though sometimes women's basketball environments, depending on where you go, they're not always, it's not the same as if you're playing it like, a UConn women's environment versus one of the, if you just go play a team that's never usually near the top of their game. And I'm sure it's the same for men's too. I'm not trying to make it just a one-sided thing. But either way, road wins are road wins. They got one 76-72 to be 4-0. This week they'll play Butler on Wednesday. That game telecasted on Big Ten Plus. And then that's the only thing they got this week. They'll be back at home again, they'll be in Fort Myers, Florida the following week, taking on Florida Gulf Coast. So that'll be interesting to see what happens when they travel down there. I think it's called the Coconut Hoops Classic. They'll also face Gonzaga and a couple of other teams, it looks like. So we'll see what that looks like next week. So that is going to wrap it up for today's episode of In Touch with Indiana Sports. A little bit shorter than usual, but sure. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. Sometimes episodes will go quite a bit longer. Sometimes they won't. Today's just one of those that's a little bit shorter. So appreciate you guys for listening and watching and checking this out. And we'll be back next week to do another one. And until then, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by thehoosier.com.